confessing to extrajudicial killings in Kenya. Counter-terrorism police admit executing suspects on government orders. Kenya's president denies running death squads, but one police hitman says he's killed more than 50 suspects. This is Inside Story. Hello, warm welcome to this special edition of Inside Story. Death squads sanctioned by the Kenyan government charged with killing so-called terrorism suspects without trial and with training and support from Britain and Israel. Officers from within Kenya's counter-terrorism units have admitted carrying out what they say are extrajudicial killings, saying the chain of command reaches all the way to the president's office. Kenya's president has strongly denied running any such program, but officers speaking to Al Jazeera's investigative unit confessed to being behind hundreds of extrajudicial killings a year, targeting what they refer to as Muslim radicals and planting evidence to make victims appear like terror suspects. Al Jazeera was also told Britain and Israel not only knew of the elimination programs, but provided training, support and intelligence. We'll be hearing from Kenya's information minister in a moment and from investigative journalist Simon Bozeman. But first, here's his report.
This is the body of Makaburi, one of 21 suspected radical Muslims allegedly gunned down by Kenya's police since 2012. Makaburi predicted his death when I met him last year.
I'm the one who is being terrorized. My life is the one which is in danger.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit has spoken exclusively to the police hitmen involved in the extrajudicial killings. We verified that they were members of Kenya's counter-terrorism units, and we agreed to conceal their identities.
Makaburu was killed by the police. That execution was planned in Nairobi by very top high-ranking police officers and government officials.
Since I was employed, I've killed over 50.
Day in, day out, you hear of eliminating suspects. Enough to total, you can see about almost 500.
A year?
Yeah.
Britain and America have provided millions of dollars of counter-terrorism training and equipment to Kenya's police. And the officers claim Western security agencies know about the killings because they provide some of the intelligence in police reports like these obtained by Al Jazeera.
Do you think the British know that you guys are eliminating terrorist targets?
They do. Once they give us the information, they know what they have told us. Tomorrow is no longer there. We have worked. Definitely the report that you gave us has been worked on.
The head of the International Bar Association says the interviews provide prima facie evidence that individuals from Western governments are complicit in the killings and could face charges.
If there are individuals that are found to be not just training, but are actually found to have been directing, supervising, targeting individuals that in turn would be targeted in a killing, then there is a criminal responsibility.
The British Foreign Office said it was aware of the allegations of extrajudicial killings in Kenya, but rejected any involvement, while the Kenyan police denied running an elimination program.
So joining us now here in the studio in Doha is the Right Honourable Fred Matiang'i, the Kenyan Information Minister. Thank you for being with us. Now, you've seen the report, you've heard the allegations that are made in it. Your response?
Well, I had a chance to look at the film, and I was very surprised about some of the allegations that are made about, one, Kenyan security forces, and particularly the narrative that's being built by the film, linking the war on terror in Kenya and in the Horn of Africa to Western nations, to Israel and all that. First of all, I think it's both unfair, inaccurate and untruthful to try to build the challenges we have in our country as a religious conflict. The intention of the film is to demonstrate that there is a religious conflict in the country, that a particular religion is being targeted, which is not true. We are faced with a serious security challenge. We are fighting terrorists, a gang of criminals, murderers who are killing innocent people in Kenya. And we are not fighting against Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, atheists, or whatever religion they are. The film characterizes the challenges we have in our country in a particular, very common perspective, and drawing a dichotomy along religious lines, which is not true.
All right. Well, I mean, no one doubts the security challenges that Kenya is facing right now. There were, of course, the stories in the news about the terrorist attacks on the people on the bus and the shopping mall as well last year. But you said that there were aspects of this report that were untruthful. What was it about that you say was untruthful?
First of all, I take great exception to efforts to characterize uniformed police forces in our country as a murdering squad, to give a criminal identity to security forces in our country, and to insinuate that our police or various other aspects of our security agencies are involved in committing crimes, murdering people, and so on.
We have you here now. This is your chance to address these allegations, and attempts were also made earlier to try and get in touch with members of the Kenyan government, and there was no response forthcoming.
I wish we were having this conversation before this film was aired, so that we would know this is the information that's available, and this is what you need to respond to, and then we would be able to even try to authenticate some of the points that have been made. But the question here is, who are those people that you spoke to? We do not know them. So how can I comment on people I do not know?
This isn't the first time we've heard reports like this coming out of Kenya. It isn't just this report. There was a UN report by the UN Special Rapporteur a few years back that talked about these so-called extrajudicial killings that were being carried out by Kenyan authorities a few years back. So, I mean, it isn't just one report, is what I'm putting to you.
To this day, that report that you're referring to by the UN has never produced tangible and controvertible evidence on the killings they were referring to. Rumor.
What do you consider tangible and controvertible
Rumor, innuendo, and hearsay is okay. But for someone to go to, if someone were to go to a village, for example, in the case of the UN Human Rights Report, if someone were to go to a village or to a particular place in the country and say, for sure, I saw 2, 5, 6 people who were arrested from here by police officers, and we are sure they were killed by police officers, that is information that you can rely on and talk about. Rumor, innuendo, and gossip do not amount to credible information.
I want to move on to the comments that former Kenyan Prime Minister Raila Odinga made on Nation FM this morning, Kenyan radio station. He said, "I've been in the National Security Council and I'm aware that the government has a hit squad." What do you say to that?
Well, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga is a politician. I am a technocrat. I'm a public official. Whatever happens in the National Security Council is stuff that happens under oath. I cannot discuss what happens in the National Security Council on air. And I wish I had former Prime Minister Raila Odinga here so that I ask him questions and I ask him to verify what he's talking about. I am not aware personally of any hit squad. The government does not maintain a hit squad because hit squads are maintained by criminal regimes. The government in Kenya is not a criminal regime. This is a democratically elected government that is in power legitimately, and it cannot maintain a hit squad. You cannot have a hit squad against your own people. So it's up to former Prime Minister Raila Odinga to tell you exactly what he means by a hit squad.
You talked earlier about this being framed as a kind of religious war, but when you talk to many of the Muslim communities in Kenya, they will tell you that they feel that they are being targeted, systematically targeted by the Kenyan authorities, and that this policy is actually fueling further unrest in that it is acting as a kind of recruiting tool for more young men to join these Islamist groups like Al-Shabaab.
That's complete hearsay. It's rumor, it's innuendo and gossip.
Well, no, these are accounts of people in the Muslim community in Kenya. Are you saying that they're making this up?
A huge part of the leadership, national leadership in our country, are Muslims. So, do you want to say that Muslims are targeting Muslims, as it were? We don't have a puritanical Christian government. We have a government that draws from across the religious divide in our country. It's not formed on the basis of religious subscription, but it draws from across, the religious communities of Kenya. So are you therefore saying that Muslims in government are targeting Muslims? Because the question is, our government is not a pure Christian government, it's not a Hindu government, it's not a Muslim government. It draws from across the religious sectors of our country. And so how is it that members of a religious community who have got very strong representation in the same government could blame that same government of targeting them? It doesn't make sense to anybody. So as I said again, this is a clear case of inaccurate, rumor, innuendo that is being battled around by people who are battling a particular narrative about the security challenges we have in the country. They are not religious, they are not cultural. We are dealing with crime. And crime is not about the religion that the criminals subscribe to. We're dealing with criminals. And we've never characterized them as a government as Muslims because they are criminals. Their identity is...
Who's killing the senior clerics then?
We don't know. Do you know? If you know, give us information. And anyone who knows that should give the information to the police. I am aware that investigations are going on in my country right now on some of these issues. And when investigations
we
are
were told
going on,
categorically from this report that it was the police.
By who? Because the question is, someone across the road cannot tell you it is the police who are killing so and so. If they have that information and they know it's the police, how come they have not made reports anywhere? Gossiping about it is no solution. Who are the people? Who knows them? We are doing investigations. Our government is engaged in investigations to find out who actually is committing crimes, including killing people, innocent people. The question is, investigations are going on about several crimes that have been committed in the country. And while investigations are going on, it's not fair, first of all, to pass judgment on this and to characterize the criminals as belonging to this or the other religion. We are dealing with criminals. And the accusations about the police being involved in the killing of Muslim clerics and so on, it's just mere gossip, rumor, or basically innuendos that are peddled by people who have a different kind of agenda. Investigations are going on. If people know who actually is killing the clerics, why can't they submit the report to the police? We don't know them as a government. That's why we are conducting investigations. And we are not alone. We are collaborating with colleague governments in the region. We are collaborating with various international agencies.
If they are then found through further investigations, if they are then found to be the police,
will be prosecuted.
You will accept that?
They will be prosecuted. They'll face the full force of the law.
Even if it's police?
Whoever they are. At the moment, we don't know who they are. That's why investigations are going on. And when investigations lead to a particular point, whoever those are will be arrested. And they will face the full force of the law. We are a law-abiding government, and we are committed to ensuring that we live by the rule of law.
Mr. Fred Matiang'i, Kenyan Information Minister, thank you very much for talking to us on Inside Story.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, joining us now to talk more about this is from London, Al Jazeera investigative journalist Simon Bozeman, who was involved in putting together that report. You heard the report just a few moments ago. And in Oxford, David Anderson, Professor of African History and Politics. Good to have you both with us, gentlemen. Now, David, if I could start with you. Now, you heard our interview there with the Kenyan Information Minister when he uses words like mischaracterization and hearsay and presenting a false narrative and so on. What's your response to that?
Well, the minister is in a difficult position, isn't he? He perhaps doesn't know the full background. He's seen the film, but he has to respond on behalf of his government. As he pointed out to you, he is a technocrat, not a politician. He's not been elected. He's one of the 4 technocratic nominees in Kenya's cabinet. So his view is perhaps a little different than a politician's would be. I think he's doing his best to be honest, but perhaps doesn't have all the facts. I mean, for example, we do know that this is not the first time that Kenya's police forces have been accused of extrajudicial killings. And they've never, in the past, investigated any of the allegations made. We also know at the moment that the killing of Muslim leaders in coastal Kenya and northeastern province has not been followed by police investigations. And in fact, this has been widely reported in the past year Al Jazeera is not the first news company to say something about this. So we do have more evidence than the minister has admitted. And I think it's a little disappointing that he wasn't showing more concern about the allegations rather than simply seeking to deny them. But I'm afraid that's become a bit of a Kenyan trait in recent months.
Simon Bozeman, what evidence do you have that these death squads are operational from the reporting that you've done on this story?
Well, just taking up what the minister said, we obviously took multiple steps to verify that these were the people that they claimed to be, going far beyond just seeing their police IDs to corroborating their stories with witnesses and the numerous human rights groups who have taken years documenting police abuses, and also speaking to the families of victims of the Kenyan police, seeing the hurt that it caused them. These weren't imagined pains, they weren't imagined wrongdoings, they were real, and they were witnessed by us and unfortunately by many innocent Kenyans, and from all races and all religions. To paint it as a Muslim-Christian division within the film, I think is wrong, because we highlight 8 killings, of which the majority, 5 of them, had nothing to do with Islamic militancy at all. The young people in Nyeri weren't all Muslims either. So we pointed across to police abuses across all aspects of society, and I was disappointed that the Kenyan Information Minister didn't address those.
A lot of people would be interested to know as well, Simon, what was the motivation for these officers going on camera with their identities not revealed, but going on camera and giving accounts in which they freely admit that they killed several people?
Well, it was mixed. Each individual officer had their own motivations for coming on, but in general, what they thought and what their heartfelt convictions were, I felt, was that they thought they were doing the best they could in a very dangerous situation for Kenya and for Kenyans. And a lot of them thought they were doing the best that they could. Now, they were defending Kenya, they were targeting suspected Islamic militants, they were frustrated with the judicial process, they were frustrated with the inabilities to secure convictions. So I think their motivation was to explain their frustrations, it was to explain the difficult situation in which they work, but at the heart of what they do it because they think that they're doing the best thing for their countries. Now, when pressed, they do admit that it is probably counterproductive, it is probably not in the best interests in the long term, but in the short term, I think they feel they have no option. And I think that's why they spoke out, to express those frustrations, but those deep convictions they were doing the right thing.
David Anderson, Kenya unfortunately has a history of this sort of thing going back to colonial times, doesn't it?
It does indeed, and assassinations have been part of Kenya's political culture in one way or another, certainly since the 1950s. But I think the recent spate of events is really linked to the war in southern Somalia, and we have to keep that context in mind. And I think Simon Bozeman is quite right to say that the majority of Kenyans, not just those who were interviewed on the programme, but the majority of Kenyans in the wider public, have no criticism, really, of these assassinations. They think, well, Kenya is at war and all is fair. And that if these people are against the state, then why not kill them? Now, this is in a political culture in Kenya where impunity from prosecution has been the norm for a very long time historically, and where the police pretty much do as they please without any real recourse to investigations of their activities. So the Kenyan public's become used to this happening and perhaps is a little complacent about what it means. I think the present spate of killings has served to worsen the position of the Muslim minority in Kenya. And however much the minister may protest about this not being about religion, the Muslim population at the coast and in the northeast increasingly has come to feel that it is being victimized. The Kenyan state, in my opinion, has done far too little to assuage these concerns. I liked hearing what the minister had to say about it. He was trying to be positive and upbeat and reassuring. I'd like to hear many more Kenyan cabinet ministers saying exactly the same thing, and I'd like to see policies being implemented that went some way to doing something practical on the ground about incorporating and assimilating Muslim politics into the decisions taken about the current war. Because at the moment, whatever the minister says about Muslim cabinet ministers and Muslim politicians, they are not being included enough in this process.
Simon Bozeman, you mentioned there that these sort of methods, as David Anderson has just alluded to as well, are not going to come as much of a surprise to many people in Kenya, and indeed they support it. So what do you expect to come from this report? What do you expect the result to be?
Well, when the UN produced their report on extrajudicial killings a few years ago, there was talk of police reform and of pushing through some very much needed changes within the Kenyan police service. They didn't come. They've been stalled ever since then. Now, hopefully, the only real pressure that can be put on the Kenyan government is by external forces, by Western aid donors, by the British, by the Americans, by all the multiple countries that have presence in East Africa. And those countries need to carry out their own investigations because they are potentially complicit in some of these actions. And if there is pressure from external forces on Kenya to carry out the police reforms that are required and to push them through in spite of politicians' hesitancy on those reforms, then there will be some good to come out of reports like this. But it requires pressure from outside government and outside the Kenyan state itself.
David Anderson, given everything...
Well, Kenya,
so go ahead.
Kenya does now have an independent police authority that is supposed to look into allegations of just this type. And in the recent months, that authority has done reports on the Operation Usalama Watch in Nairobi, which was a roundup of suspects suspected to be associated with Al-Shabaab. It's also done investigations into the killings at Mpeketoni in Lamu County. And the reports on both those occasions have been critical of government and of what government has done. And in the wake of the Usalama Watch report, there is likely to be investigations and prosecutions of officers. So Kenya has gone some way to meeting these criticisms. But what needs to happen now is that the Independent Policing Authority needs to be given permission to investigate these accusations and be given proper access so that it can produce a report about this. I doubt that will happen because this will be deemed to be in the security realm and they'll be told they can't look at it. But let's see. Maybe the Kenyans will have the courage of their convictions and they'll do something about it. It would certainly go some way if they did to reassuring us all that there is no longer impunity in Kenya and that the rule of law does carry sway.
Given all of this, though, David Anderson, does perhaps more need to be done in the war of ideas in society in this region as a whole? That the deeper problems are not being tackled here in terms of all of the social and economic difficulties?
Well, I think this is a very good question and it's very important. For many, many years past, the predominantly Muslim areas of Kenya, which are the coast and the northeastern province, have been neglected. There is now an opportunity with new developments for a real economic injection into these areas and a significant amount of economic investment. The current war and the current struggles threaten that. And I'm surprised that the Kenyan government is not doing more than it has done already to try and assuage the anxieties, to win over those in those regions who it needs as its allies going forward, and making it clear to them that they can all benefit by putting this insurgency to an end. I think they've found themselves in a trap where they're at war and they have to talk tough, but they don't always need to act tough at home. And I think they've found it really difficult to marry these two things together. And they just need to behave with a little more thought and consideration for the wider problem at home if they're going to tackle it.
That's going to have to be the last word. Thank you to both of you from London, Al Jazeera investigative journalist Simon Bozeman, and joining us from Oxford, David Anderson, Professor of African History and Politics. And our thanks as well to Kenya's Minister of Information, Fred Matiang'i, who joined us a little earlier. And you can add your voice to this discussion as always. Just post your comments to us at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or contact us on Twitter. Our handle there is AJ Inside Story. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.